there's a moment almost everyone has had. You're scrolling late at night, half tired, half numb, and you land on someone's apartment. Soft light. A single ceramic bowl on a wooden table. A meal that looks like it cost more thought than money. And some quiet part of your brain whispers, that person has it together. Meanwhile, your own kitchen counter has 3 half-finished snacks on it, and you can't remember the last time anything in your life felt calm instead of chaotic. Here's the strange part. A lot of those expensive-looking lives online belong to people who are, financially, doing far less than you'd guess. Some of the calmest, richest-feeling homes and routines you've seen were built on almost nothing. Not because those people are secretly wealthy, because they were never trying to look wealthy in the first place. And maybe that's what actually stings a little if you're honest. You've probably tried the version where you spend to feel better. The new gadget. The delivery order at 9 p.m. because cooking felt like too much. The upgrade you couldn't quite afford but bought anyway because you needed something to feel different that day. And for an hour it worked. Then the feeling faded, and the bank balance didn't come back. That contradiction is worth sitting with for a second because it breaks something most of us were taught without ever noticing we were taught it. We grew up absorbing the idea that richness is visible, that it has a price tag attached, a logo, a receipt. So when our bank account doesn't match the life we want to feel like we're living, we assume the problem is us. Not enough discipline. Not enough hustle. Not enough money. But what if that was never the actual equation? There's a country that's been quietly practicing something different for generations, and it has almost nothing to do with money at all. It's not a trend. It's not a TikTok aesthetic. It's older than that, and once you understand the mechanism underneath it, you start noticing how much of your own stress was never really about your wallet. Let's start with the belief we got wrong. Most of us think frugal means less. Less flavor, less comfort, less joy, more sacrifice. A smaller version of the life you actually want. But in Korean households, for generations, resourcefulness wasn't treated like punishment. It was treated like a skill, something closer to craftsmanship than restriction. You weren't saving money because you were deprived. You were saving money because doing more with less was, itself, considered a kind of intelligence worth admiring. That reframe matters more than it sounds like it does, because it changes the emotional experience of the exact same behavior. 2 hands can reuse the same jar of ingredients, and one person feels clever, satisfied, in control, while another feels quietly humiliated, like they're being forced into it. The action is identical. The meaning attached to it is not. And this is where things get strange, because the difference isn't really about the habit at all. Underneath a lot of this is something Korean culture has a word for that English doesn't really have. Nunchi. Loosely, it means reading a room, a moment, a situation with precision. Noticing what's actually needed instead of defaulting to more. It's a kind of attentiveness. And attentiveness, it turns out, is free. You don't need income to notice things clearly. You need presence. That's the deeper mechanism sitting underneath habits that, on the surface, look like simple money-saving tricks. Think about how rarely you actually practice that kind of attention in your own week. Most of us move through our days on autopilot, refreshing the same 3 apps, buying the same convenient thing because deciding otherwise takes energy we don't feel like spending. Noticing takes a beat longer than reacting. And reacting is what most of modern life has quietly trained us to do. You can see nunchi playing out most clearly in the kitchen if you know where to look. Banchan, the small side dishes that show up again and again at Korean meals, aren't really leftovers in the way we think of leftovers. Nothing is treated as finished. Kimchi that's gone a little too sour doesn't get thrown away, it becomes stew. Rice that's gone stale becomes something else entirely by dinner. There's no concept of waste the way we usually experience it because nothing is ever really over. It's just mid-transformation. Sit with that for a second, because it's the opposite of how most of us relate to things we own. We treat objects, food, even routines, as either useful or garbage. On or off. Korean frugal culture treats almost everything as ongoing. Nothing is discarded. It's just waiting to become its next version. And once you see that pattern in the kitchen, you start noticing it everywhere else too. Traditional Korean homes carry the same instinct into physical space. Low furniture, rooms that serve more than one purpose, an emphasis on natural light instead of decoration. That wasn't minimalism as a trend. It was minimalism as peace. A quiet room costs nothing and somehow still reads as calm, as intentional, almost as luxurious, to anyone who walks into it. Your brain doesn't need a price tag to register a space as expensive feeling. It just needs the absence of noise. Compare that to how a lot of us decorate when we're stressed. We fill space instead of clearing it. More candles, more shelves, more things we saw someone else own, as if enough objects will eventually add up to a feeling of arrival. But the feeling never quite arrives, because the formula was backwards the whole time. Calm isn't something you accumulate. It's something you uncover, usually by removing things, not buying them. But here's the part that most people miss entirely, because it isn't about objects or rooms at all. It's about people. There's another word, jeong, that describes a kind of warmth built slowly through small repeated gestures. Sharing a side dish with a neighbor. Gifting fruit for no occasion. Sitting through a meal that takes longer than it needs to, on purpose. Jeong functions almost like a currency, except it never touches a bank account. It builds a feeling of wealth through connection instead of consumption. And once someone feels genuinely cared for, the pull to buy their way into feeling valuable quietly loses its grip. It's worth asking yourself, honestly, when the last time was that you felt rich in that way. Not impressed by something you owned, but genuinely full, sitting across from someone who wasn't checking their phone, sharing something small that neither of you were performing for anyone else. That feeling doesn't show up on a receipt, but most people can tell you exactly how long it's been since they last had it. At first, all of this sounds almost too clean. Reuse your food, calm your space, invest in people, and suddenly you feel rich. But this is where the honesty has to come in, because the deeper problem isn't the habit itself. Two people can do the exact same thing. Reuse the same jar. Cook the same rice twice. Sit in the same quiet room. And one of them will feel resourceful, even proud, while the other feels ashamed, like they're just poor and pretending it's a lifestyle. The habit is identical. The emotional outcome isn't. What actually determines the difference is the story running underneath the behavior. Frugality practiced from fear, from not wanting to feel poor, tightens the chest. Frugality practiced from care, from wanting to use what you have well, does the opposite. It creates ease. And this matters because it's easy to hear all of this and think the answer is just reuse things and you'll feel peaceful. That's not quite honest. If you're reusing that jar while resenting every second of it, silently comparing yourself to people who don't have to, the habit won't save you. It'll just be another thing you're doing correctly while feeling terrible. The habits Korean frugal culture built weren't designed as hacks to trick your brain into contentment. They were built inside a context of intention, patience, and craftsmanship over a long time by people who weren't performing for an audience. Copy the behavior without the intention, and you've just made yourself a slightly more elaborate version of stressed. So this isn't really a video about Korean habits, not underneath it. It's about where you're standing when you do the thing you already do. The habits were never magic. They were just proof that attention, not money, was doing most of the emotional work the whole time. Maybe the goal was never to spend like you're rich. Maybe it was to pay attention like you already are. If this changed how you see your own daily habits, even a little, you can subscribe. There's more of this kind of thinking coming.